Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast. I'm your host, Hamza Islam. My guest this week is Shaan Baig, who's the founder and CEO of SB Innovations, a research and development company focusing on creating solutions for the world's pressing issues. At the age of 13, Shaan suffered a concussion while playing hockey, and after learning about the growing problem of concussions for athletes worldwide, Shaan designed a helmet that would help prevent concussions in the future. I'm so excited that I finally got to make this interview possible because he is someone I've been looking forward to talking to for a really long time. So, without further ado, Shaan Baig, welcome to the Oh My Curry Goodness podcast.
Thank you so much, Hamza. I'm very much looking forward to our conversation and excited kind of get to know you, but also share a little bit about my story. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for showing interest. I remember when I first reached out to you, I was a little bit hesitant because it's like I saw all the work that you're doing, and I'm like, there's no way he's gonna join my podcast. But you you showed the you were really interested in my vision and my idea, and so I really cannot thank you enough. And also, I know that like all my other guests, you are extremely busy. So the fact that we're able to make this possible is really cool to see. But let's before we talk about STEM, I actually really do want to talk about hockey because it's a sport that I've started having interest in. I don't play it, but I do love watching it, and it's such a fast-paced sport compared to so many others. Now, obviously, like I mentioned, when you were 13, you suffered a concussion while playing hockey, and this really led you to getting involved in STEM. But I would love to know if hockey meant more to you than like what hockey meant to you. Was it something that you ever saw yourself going professional, or was it just a sport that you just love playing?
Honestly, when I was first growing up, it was definitely something I just joined for fun. I was born in Boston, but grew up in Montreal. And so, as the stereotypical Canadian, just everyone is just enthralled in ice hockey. So, I started that off when I was like 5 years old. And I guess, like everyone, I had hopes of going pro or like playing in the NHL. But I think once you reach a certain age, you're like, yeah, this probably won't happen. And it more so became kind of an outlet to be my best self in academics. And to be my best academic, I would be playing ice hockey. And so it was kind of the impression I'd use it to maybe, go to a university, get some sort of scholarship. Still to this day, I'm now playing for my university team, and last year had my last year of the juniors, which is kind of right before you'd probably end up going anywhere higher. Yeah, I guess I would say when I was young, I would have thought of going pro, but I think once I reached like 14, 15, you realize early on it probably won't happen. So focus more on the academic side of things. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you or relate to you in the sense that when I was little, my favorite sport is soccer, and so growing up, I had that same mentality where I was like, oh, I want to be a professional soccer player, and then I was just like, no, actually, we get to a certain age where you're like, maybe I think it's best to retire, and but no, I think it's great that you still play hockey today. I will just highly recommend that you never put me on your team. I'm extremely bad at it, and one of my favorite positions to play is goalkeeper or goalie in hockey. And I can't imagine trying to save a puck that's coming at me at 1,000 miles per hour. But I don't know how you guys do it.
I think goalies are insane. I'll be honest. I play forward. You have to be you have to be a psychopath to be in nets, getting shots like 100 kilometers an hour, rubber pucks. All goalies, these goalies have to be the weirdest people to think it's normal to go in front of a net, just get blasted slap shots at you. That's a whole thing on its own. I tell every goalie I know, you have to be the most insane person I know. So yeah, I don't blame you for that.
Let's talk about STEM because this has been part of your whole journey. And what was interesting was that, at the age of 13, you suffered this concussion and it really led you to be able to pursue the STEM field. And I would love to know what it was about that helmet that led you to being invested in STEM, because it wasn't just a let me fix this problem and go back to playing hockey. You kind of just saw this
Mhm.
as, oh, let me find a way to solve more issues in the future?
Yeah, I think what actually the interesting thing that got me into that project initially was growing up, I really liked hockey and I really liked science. And I remember in grade six, I had to do a science fair project. And instead of doing like the typical like random science buddy website finding an experiment, my father always told me, find a mix between hockey and science and do a project something on that because it'd be more interesting to you. And so I did like two projects like back grade six, grade seven, hockey related, and I really liked that mix of both. And then it happened where I got a concussion, got me more interested in it. And so that's why my first like few research projects were simply ice hockey, related science fair projects. But when it came to the helmet, um, it started off as a science fair project. Essentially, it was just replicating the anatomy of the skull in a hockey helmet, right? This is Mother Nature's best way to prevent us from concussions, our skull and how our brain floats in the synovial spinal fluid. So, what if we can kind of best recreate this? And so essentially, it's this free floating innermost polyurethane foam that can kind of match and mold to the skull and be kind of free floating, have like a space in between the harder kind of foam attached to like the shell portion. And so that was the project. But it was when I first went to the regional science fair for the first time, I realized one, you can make money, two, you can travel places. And that was like the most interesting thing as a 13-year-old, where you're like, wow, I can make $200, $100, and maybe go to like somewhere in the rest of Canada for the nationals. And so that was, I would say, the the first motivation, but it quickly changed where I realized you can kind of have some sort of real world impact while still confined in the classroom walls of your high school. And that was what really intrigued me. And so I think it was a culmination of one, my father's advice, and two, just seeing how a simple project that was an extracurricular can actually take you somewhere like outside of things, where it be a monetary value, whether it be pushing early academic career, if you can even call it that. But it was definitely those two factors that played a role into kind of seeing research and get me into STEM through that initial kind of hockey mixed science project. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact how you mentioned that this really started from like I guess some sort of like science project or science fair project, because it's always interesting how when people like come up with like, okay, I want to solve some of the biggest issues, and it's like, how did you start? I started at a science fair project, and it's so simple, and yet that simple idea really propelled you into doing something big.
Mhm.
Now, here's something I want to talk about, because I'm sure that everyone in different fields go through this, but especially in STEM, which is one of the biggest issues when it comes to STEM is that we sometimes it's either we get it or we don't get it. And what we fail to understand is that it's a process. And so I know, or maybe you can definitely allude to this. I'm sure the helmet, you didn't fix that helmet, or that helmet wasn't made in like 15 minutes, right? That took a long process. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's it's very difficult to tell people that, if it fails, it doesn't mean it's the end. You have to figure out how to solve that problem so that you are able to get to that end goal. As someone who's involved in STEM, how do you try to convince other people to enjoy the process, enjoy failing, enjoy not getting it right the first time? Because those failures, those times where that, even if it doesn't work, ultimately it will lead you to your end goal, and you will be able to create whatever that final product may be.
Yeah, I definitely get this a lot. People see kind of the end products of what I do at whether it be like a conference or whatnot. But I always remind them that, I did start doing really basic projects, right? You have to learn the scientific method somehow. My first project is probably the stupidest thing you could possibly think of. It was testing the flex of a hockey stick and see how it affected the speed of a puck. Obviously, the stiffer the stick, the further it'll go. Or, the second project I did was seeing the temperature of an ice hockey puck and how that affected how fast it went because I went to an NHL game and I saw they took out a puck out of a fridge in the penalty box, and I was like, "What's going on there?" And also to kind of the direct thing when people ask me a similar question to what you just did, um, I'll often say, at least my success in my research projects is like pregnancy. They only see the end product, but they don't see the 9 months of, work I put into it. Obviously, I'm not. That's definitely the the human side of what I would normally say. But in terms of like my professional answer, um, you definitely have to start somewhere. You can learn the basics of the scientific method in class, intro methods, blah blah blah. But at the end of the day, you can only learn by doing stuff, in my opinion, and I'm sure everyone that's for any field for that matter. And it's whether you can kind of utilize the opportunities you have, whether it be extracurriculars at your high school or elementary school, whether it be a robotics competition, a hackathon, a science fair. These are excellent methods of kind of getting into these STEM academic fields at a young age. But I would definitely say it's just a matter of how much time you're willing to put in because it doesn't take some sort of inherent intelligence. It's really how much hard work you're willing to put in because I'll be the first one to tell everyone, my report cards weren't the best compared to my peers, or I didn't have the bestest of grades. It was definitely not that I guess separated me from the rest, but it was more so how much time I was willing to commit. Instead of in high school going home to play video games with my friends, I was more so willing to go to the lab and work on these experiments and even to start on them. No one's going to take a 14, 15-year-old into some medical science lab. I sent like hundreds and hundreds of emails. Like one year I sent 672 emails, I counted, just to get a maybe to talk to a professor to let me in and just read over my research proposal in grade 11. So it's are you willing to put in some sort of hard work? Because it doesn't take the smartest person in the room to work on cool things. And it's just a matter of time of when they'll be acknowledged and how you're using your opportunities, whether it be hackathon, science fairs, or even just you going home. If it's like in a field like yours, in comp sci, it's a lot easier to kind of teach yourself at home and all the availabilities on GitHub or YouTube compared to like the medical sciences. And so you see exceptional projects coming out of young, in high school and elementary school students in the comp sci field. And I'm so jealous. Like I clearly went into the wrong field. I think I should have went into comp sci or if I was even good at that stuff. But that would definitely be my advice in terms of getting into it at a young age, but rather how much time it takes to kind of get the results you want to yield. Yeah.
Yeah, I picked up two things from what you were saying. So like the first thing was the time, right? And you also brought up like it's not an inherent thing. It's not like, you were born to do this because you mentioned how you didn't have the best report cards. And so sometimes like when you're inventing things, it's very easy to compare yourself to other people because they're like, "Oh, they're doing it at a much quicker rate than I am." And
Mm.
I've said this with a few guests in the past where their success is their success and your success is your success. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It's just a matter of putting in the work, remembering your why, and then ultimately you will reach that end goal. It will take some time. It will be difficult, but you will reach there as long as you put in the work. And then the second thing, and this is like eerily similar to like my podcast where when you talked about reaching out to so many people about putting trust in a 14, 15-year old, like I remember when I reached out to like hundreds of people for my podcast, and it's like maybe 10 or 20 people said yes, and it's like, well, crap, that's a lot of people that said no. But at the end of the day, you focus on what you can control, and it's so easy to kind of get yourself lost in the process because you want to create something special, you want people to help you, but at the end of the day, sometimes people don't see that. But you just have to figure out, okay, well, I want to be involved in this. It might take some time to make this work, but at the end of the day, I have to remember my why and trust the process, if that makes sense.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And it's, if I can add one more thing to that,
Yeah.
it's, you know, you can kind of simplify it in a three-step process where, one, you find your hard problem, find your why. Why are you deeply passionate about it? Second, kind of like you were, and we were both discussing, of reaching out. Um, that's pretty much the second step, right? Finding who can best, who can you capitalize on, that they have kind of a joint mission with you to kind of, we both have a same goal of sharing our, wanting to share our interests and get more people involved, and you're able to reach out. And third is, people want to listen to an individual who has access to society in a way others don't, right? That's what makes an interesting story, and how can you communicate that best. So I think once you have those three things, you really are, off to an incredible start. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I want to transition into your organization, SB Innovations, which I'm guessing you just used the initials of your first and last name.
Yeah.
Um,
Very innovative.
no, it's actually really creative. I really like the name SB Innovations.
Mhm.
And something that really stuck out to me is that you are now tackling issues such as Alzheimer's disease and prostate cancer. Now, going from concussions to all state Alzheimer's and prostate, they're all difficult issues that are impacting people, but they are a big jump. Like concussions is difficult, don't get me wrong, but Alzheimer's and prostate is, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, a whole different level. But what allowed you to take that jump from going, let's solve concussion issues, to now
Mhm.
going into looking at bigger issues such as Alzheimer's and prostate?
Yeah. So what led me to kind of start SB Innovations, before I answer your question, is more so, we alluded to earlier when we were just talking of what happens after these science fairs, what happens after hackathons. Often nothing. Projects die, and that's natural. But it's only because at a young age, we don't know, how can we push forward with it, right? How can we take it to the next level? It's just simply not something discussed at a younger age. That's only like once you're undergrad, grad school, unfortunately. And that's kind of what I focus on now, and kind of sharing with other people. But in terms of, at first, you kind of have to start small and find your interests. What I was fortunate, at a young age, was doing all these different types of projects and finding what I find most interesting, right? The helmet thing was more of an engineering based project, a mech eng project. And I quickly learned that I don't like mech eng. I don't like physics. I don't like math. And I'm really interested in the medical sciences field, and bouncing off cancer projects and whatnot. I really like neuroscience, and kind of related to the concussions, right? But it's once you're able to kind of solidify how to cater the scientific method to your interests, it's a lot easier to develop research proposals and kind of go further and further into like more complex projects. But for me, it was really bouncing around different projects, or research topics, and slowly caving into neuroscience in particular. I didn't like mech eng. I went into the medical sciences, did prostate cancer treatment testing, went into more of like diagnostic testing for bladder cancers. Then I was able to get into like a neuroscience, blood-brain barrier research, which is what I now do and study in grad school. But I was able to find that in grade 10, grade 11, and kind of carry that on. And so that's kind of how I made that switch. But it's more so of every year, every day I'm learning more in terms of background knowledge, mechanisms, but how to design experiments and whatnot, and how can that best prepare me for the next thing that I work on. So it's all cumulative. It's a slow process, but it's a fun process. Challenging, but it did overall get me to my main research interest, which is neurodegenerative diseases, and kind of stem cell research, which is now what I work on. But yeah, no, that's definitely how it kind of evolved over the years.
Yeah, and I think I like what you said about how when you are involved in hackathon or all these projects, it's very easy to just stop. But you're like, okay, let's find a way to continue to go forward. And I think
Mhm.
it's so important for people to realize that there is no finish line. Once you get to a certain point, you got to find out, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? So I love that. And kind of how we talked about enjoying the process. I know I'm sure STEM research and all this is extremely difficult, but for you personally, what has it been like to be involved in this? Are you kind of like, has there been times where you don't practice what you preach, where it's like, you run into an obstacle and you're like, oh, I give up, or I don't want to continue this? What has that process been like?
I think for me, in particular, I'm very much interested in what I'm working on now, and for the most case, it's been like that. I think at a young age, particularly in high school, you have all these people working on these interesting projects, whether it be hackathon, science fairs, but it's mostly they're doing these activities because it's going to look good on a college app, and they're in it for the wrong reasons. You're too busy. Trying to check off these preconceived imaginary boxes to look good as a conventionally attractive applicant. And I think for me in particular at a young age, I was quite interested in what I was working on. I did feel like I was going to have some sort of impact, whether it be in 5, 10 years, to get it onto the market. um, I think there was a period of time, at least in like grade 10, grade 11, where it kind of got to my head. I was always in a room with like these PhDs, these successful entrepreneurs, and I would kind of base my success off of these awards, right? And this is bad as it makes you lose your definition of success or what's meaningful to you, and it kind of derail you from what you're most interested in. And I think I was in that kind of mind space for a year and a half, and it quickly turned after I realized, I paused and was like, what am I doing? Like, why am I starting to hate the research or the speaking engagements I'm at? I reevaluated what my definition of success was, and that was kind of working on cool STEM projects that would improve at least one person's life. But it's definitely shifting away for that mindset when you're applying to undergrad schools of what's going to make my CV look good, right? Like obviously looking around at a young age of what you're most interested early on and then compound that knowledge for the next 40, 50 years is a lot more useful than doing a little bit of everything and realizing after your undergrad or whatever you don't like what you're working on. And that's like that sucks. It happens obviously, but you can kind of prevent that if you're not worried about doing this and that from a young age. So I think I've always been fortunate in enjoying what I'm doing, enjoying the process. Obviously, it's harder at times. You're going to face things like imposter syndrome, which is a whole topic on its own. But whenever you kind of start to feel uncomfortable or uneasy, it's not that feeling that you don't belong there. It's more so I'm uncomfortable because you probably have never been in that situation before. Maybe your peers have never been in that situation before, and that's exciting, right? And it's kind of embracing that and saying at this moment I'm uncomfortable, but I'm gonna allocate some of the goodness in my heart to work on the things I'm most passionate about and help as many people as I can, and kind of remember your why, like you were saying earlier. And I think when I run into those obstacles, doing and reminding myself of those things is a lot more easier to get back on pace within like a day rather than get caught up in my head.
Yeah, and I think there's something you really touched on was the times where you have imposter syndrome, or you have those moments where like you hate certain things. And I feel like when you're invested in your field, like when you're doing your whatever you're passionate about, I always think it's kind of like a marriage kind of relationship where it's like you'll have your good moments and you'll have your bad moments, but at the end of the day, like you're together, and this is like it's like your baby and your love at the same time, which is such a weird thing. But like I think that's
100%.
really I think that's really what's important is that embrace the good and embrace the bad, because ultimately these things will help you get to a better place somewhere down the line. And Now, I want to talk about the fact that you're not only doing good things for yourself, but you're also passing down that knowledge to other people because I think you have a nonprofit called the Young Scientists and Innovators, where you allow other people to discover their potential in STEM. What is it like for you to be involved in that process, going from let me do things for myself to now let me do things for other people and unlock their potential in this field?
Yeah, no, this was 100% um, one of the most important things I've done for not only myself, but like in terms of my work and the impact, I guess, world. When I was 17, 18, starting to like in my last year of high school or last year of eligibility and competing in these science fairs, me and my friend Thomas Ribeiro, also from Montreal, we were fortunate with the opportunities we've been given, right? And we've been able to see what science fair can bring you in terms of outside of the awards and all that. It can get you incredible opportunities, whether it be like speaking with your role models on panels at these big conferences or these crazy internships. It can really get you to the places you want to. Um, and a lot of people have this notion that, it's just volcanoes and all these things, which is true because that's all that's shown on the TV shows. But it'll not show you, camel riding with the dean of your undergrad school in Abu Dhabi deserts, or the fun sort of side of things. But like we said, after these science fairs ends or these events end, projects die, and there's a lot of stages where you can go to where you want to be earlier on than like while in high school, and develop companies off your projects. But how do we even get to that point? So with the organization, we kind of focus on like these sort of three stages. One is people don't know the true capabilities of engaging in these events while in high school. It's not just for nerds. It's not just for the smart students. These are the things that it can get you, whether it be, money, awards, or um, impressing people or getting cool internships that can help you in your future. It's good to kind of share your experiences with the general population of students, to say, hey, maybe this is something I want to be interested about. Because I tell people all the time, they're curious about like what I did when I was in high school, and they're like, wow, I wish I knew about that. Second, it's these people who compete in these events, hackathon, science fairs. After the events happen, they have incredible work, but how can they take it to the market, right? So we have like incubator programs to kind of take them to the next step, because we truly believe, the limit on, human progress is the ambition of the most ambitious. And so you can kind of unleash these crazy geniuses if you give them the tools necessary to make the change they want to see in the world. And so we connect them with, patent agents, venture capital firms, inventors in their sphere, researchers. And it's a lot easier to give them the tools necessary. And a lot of people are willing to back that, because there's not a lot of tools for these young students. Now there's more and more coming up, but when we started, there was quite few, and so these were kind of the motivations behind us starting YSI in particular, and it's been really exciting. And especially when COVID hit, we were able to kind of pause our current programs and 3D print face shields for healthcare workers in between the time they ran out of the supply, and like bigger corporations were kind of realizing we're going to need PPE right in like March 2020. And so it's when we all had school paused for like 2 weeks, this was what we were working on. So it's been quite interesting to kind of create that community aspect for motivated young people to kind of make a change through STEM. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the fact that you brought up the idea of community because especially when you're trying to solve some the world's pressing issues, it doesn't take one or two people. It can take a village and it can take a lot of people to tackle issues that are going to be affecting so many people. And before I let you go, I want to
Mhm.
talk about well, okay. I feel like this question is going to get me a lot of criticism, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You are involved in research for prostate cancer and Alzheimer's disease, but at the same time, you're also trying to spread awareness about STEM and realizing that this is something that can help so many people. So I gotta ask you this: which one have you found the most difficult? And I know there's someone listening going, Hamza, of course it's finding research for Alzheimer's, but kind of like how you mentioned the importance of community and trying to get people to realize their potential is not an
Yeah.
easy thing. It sounds easy, but it's really not.
I think for me in particular, on paper, it would definitely be like the research side of things. But that's at the end of the day, not what is hardest. People can only be People can only work on the things they're most passionate about. And it's hard to convince people otherwise, right? And so in my research in particular, if I'm working on Alzheimer's, neurodegenerative disease, Parkinson's, at the end of the day, I will most likely be at the end of my lifetime when my work, if at all, makes an impact. But how can you kind of put people on a pedestal to continue your work at the end of the day, or work on the meaningful medicines, the innovations, the things to counter AI if it at all, if the singularity does take fold, right? You can only do that by motivating other people to work on innovative problems or present them the options that this is a capability. And so definitely working on YSI or things of that nature at the end of the day is more difficult, purely based off of not a lot of people are interested in, at least in terms of people, I mean bigger corporations, in helping younger people, so between 12 and 18, work on high level grad research type level projects because it's a lot more energy. They don't get any gain out of it because these students don't go to their schools because they're still in high school. And so it's hard to put these things in place, and it's hard to kind of get the attention of each people because each person has their own motivations and interests, right? In terms of how I focus on commuting my, science is the key to the key to good science is communicating your ideas with empathy and compassion, and that's how it's going to kind of allow an individual to get your message. So I present my projects or my work way differently between a PhD supervisor and a 6-year-old who may be curious about my stuff. And so at the end of the day, they'll know what I'm working on, but I'll cater that message to their motivations or what they're most passionate about. And I think because of the intricacy in communicating your ideas, it's a lot more difficult to kind of um, help individuals realize their true passions in the STEM field than it is to find some sort of alternative treatment for Alzheimer's disease. And I think learning that early on has made me a better academic, but also a better individual working at YSI. So definitely the latter would be more difficult, but due to all these reasons, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely not as easy as, or it's definitely not as straightforward as people would seem, because
Mhm.
you are looking at it from a research perspective, but then also it's like how do you communicate? And you kind of touched on it, like talking to a PhD, a researcher, and then a child, like how you explain things is very is you got to figure out how to like I forget what the word I'm looking for, but it's like make it adaptable to explain to them because like a 6-year-old will not understand the components as a or a PhD person, so that can always be difficult. um Before I let you go, I want to talk about the future. And I know you kind of touched on it. We touched on it where you are constantly trying to find issues that are happening and figuring out how to solve them. But for you, what does your mentality look like for the future? Are you someone that wants to go, I there's one thing I want to accomplish and I'm done? Or is it just a continuation of finding things that are happening in the world and trying to solve this so that we do live in a better place?
In terms of like my 5-year plan, obviously it'd probably be more academic focused just because at the end of the day, I see myself doing these sorts of research, being a physician scientist, until I'm at least, 45, 50. But towards the latter part of my life, it would 100% be focused more on things like YSI, probably not YSI, but things like it. I'm more passionate about making young people realize that, they are the leaders of tomorrow, but they don't need to wait until tomorrow to lead. Um, and I definitely will be working on these things in simultaneously to being a physician scientist. And I see doing both things, academics and this type of STEM outreach work, till at least the foreseeable future. Uh, it is a hard question, but I definitely see the latter part of my life be focused more on the outreach STEM stuff, but definitely focused on researching neurodegenerative diseases, trying to solve the mechanisms, and then go to the bedside as a physician and kind of use these research innovations that I worked on in the lab, but bringing them to the patients at the forefront. That would definitely be my biggest goal moving forward in terms of my academic career. Yeah.
Yeah. I know I love the fact that you kind of like you're seeing in both ways where you want to solve issues that are happening, but also continuing that outreach perspective. And I think you kind of mentioned it where it's like, let them be the leaders of tomorrow or find that leadership capabilities. And I'm so glad that you are someone that doesn't want to just see success for yourself, but for other people. And I think that's what we need to see in this world. So, Shaan, thank you so much for joining this podcast. Thank you for sharing your journey. And I look forward to seeing all the amazing things you do, whether that's convince or inspiring other people to be involved in STEM or in your research in finding solutions to some of the biggest issues happening.
Thank you so much, Hamza, for inviting me. And yeah, I look forward to hearing the rest of the guests. It's been an incredible show so far. So can't wait to see where it goes off. Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Thank you guys so much for continuing to support this podcast, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one.